2 years ago, on what began as an ordinary Sunday, 11-year-old Eugene Warren walked out of her church's baptism class in Pine Hollow, Idaho, and vanished. Just like that. No goodbye, no final text, no trace. Pine Hollow wasn't the kind of town where children disappeared. It was a place where doors were left unlocked, where the mailman waved to every porch, and where neighbors still shared casseroles during snowstorms. A place so safe it felt immune to the kind of horror you only saw on cable news. But on that day, that illusion shattered like glass underfoot. Eugene never made it home. She was last seen crossing the street with friends. A normal moment, a forgettable moment, and then gone. The days that followed were chaos wrapped in hope. Search dogs, helicopters, posters taped to every telephone pole. Rachel and Daniel Warren, her parents, didn't sleep. They didn't eat. They wandered every wooded path and drainage ditch like ghosts in borrowed skin. The whole town grieved with them at first, but grief has an expiration date for outsiders. Weeks turned to months. And as the casseroles stopped coming, so did the calls, so did the prayers. The police called it a cold case, but for Rachel it was anything but cold. It burned in her veins every day. It took over their marriage, turned their house into a museum of memories no one could bear to touch. Daniel, once a pillar of steady faith, began skipping church. He couldn't handle the way people looked at him, with pity or worse, with relief that it wasn't their child. He didn't want scriptures, he wanted answers, and there were none. Rachel, on the other hand, clung to church like it was the only thing left keeping her afloat. She poured herself into administrative work, organizing potlucks, cleaning pews, printing bulletins, anything to keep her mind and hands busy. She became the woman who smiled too hard, prayed too long, and who secretly sometimes screamed into her pillow when the house was empty. Then on a sticky July morning, the phone rang. No caller ID, no name, just a voice. Genderless, emotionless. "I saw a girl near Bryant Park," it said. "She looked just like your daughter. She was with a man, a community event. I thought you should know." Rachel didn't even ask who it was. She didn't need to. In 2 years, she had learned that most tips were hoaxes or cases of mistaken identity, each one lifting her hopes just long enough to drop them off a cliff. But this one was different. There was no desperation in the caller's tone. No vagueness, just simple, pointed words, and something in her gut shifted. By sundown, she and Daniel were on a red-eye flight to New York. They arrived the next morning, sleep-deprived and carrying only one suitcase, and a box of missing person flyers so worn the edges curled like old leaves. Their Airbnb was nothing fancy, just a small second-floor walk-up in Queens with creaky wooden floors and faded floral curtains. Daniel immediately got on the phone with NYPD, coordinating their scheduled meeting. Rachel didn't wait. She opened her laptop, her fingers trembling, and typed in the address from the call. Google Maps loaded slowly, as if it too held its breath. She dragged the little yellow figure onto the streets surrounding Bryant Park. Clicked, zoomed, panned left, and then she saw it. There on Mole Street, a girl in a pink hoodie walking beside a man. Rachel's pulse exploded in her ears. She leaned in, her nose practically against the screen, the hoodie. She recognized it. Bright pink with a faded unicorn patch just below the collarbone. She had bought that hoodie for Eugene's 11th birthday, just 3 weeks before her daughter vanished. She remembered the way Eugene twirled in front of the mirror, saying, "It makes me feel like magic." "Daniel," she whispered, "look." He glanced up, still on hold with the precinct. "Rachel, we've seen this before, 100 pink hoodies." "You can't." "No," she said, her voice tightening. Look at the pattern, that's her hoodie." Daniel's expression stayed guarded. Tired, careful. "It's blurry," he said softly. "You know how many times we've been here." She didn't answer. Her hands were already moving again, zooming in, switching angles. The image flickered between frames. No clear face, just backs, just silhouettes. But Rachel's heart had already made the connection. She had stopped believing in coincidences long ago. And somehow she knew this wasn't another dead end. This was a beginning. The police were expecting them in less than an hour, but Rachel couldn't look away from the screen. The digital rendering of Mole Street blinked in front of her like a scene from a dream she couldn't wake up from. The girl in the pink hoodie, she couldn't shake it. The shape of the shoulders, the swing of the ponytail, even the angle of the feet as she walked. Eugene had always had a particular stride, slightly pigeon-toed, like she was always a step ahead of her own thoughts. Rachel would have known it anywhere. "We should get going," Daniel said, hanging up the phone. "The station's not far, maybe 10 minutes." But Rachel didn't move. "There's a church on Mole Street," she said quietly. "It's just down the road from where this was taken." Daniel raised an eyebrow. So I want to go just for a moment. Daniel sighed and rubbed his temples. Rachel, we don't have time for this. The police. Please, she interrupted. Just 5 minutes, I need to see it. There was no fighting it. Daniel had learned by now, when Rachel got that look in her eyes, something deeper than logic was speaking through her. Something anchored in the kind of knowing only mothers carry. The drive to Mole Street was brief, but Rachel felt every second stretching like string pulled tight. Her heart thudded like a war drum against her ribs. The neighborhood looked different in real life. Older, smaller, quieter than the neat, flattened version on Google Maps. The church sat at the corner, modest and sun-worn, with a crooked sign out front that read Grace and Truth Fellowship. Rachel stepped out of the car and walked toward the doors. Daniel stayed behind, frustrated but silent, watching her from the driver's seat. The sanctuary was nearly empty. The air was cool and smelled faintly of candle wax and polished wood. A single man was wiping down pews with slow, rhythmic movements, humming an old hymn under his breath. "Excuse me," Rachel said softly. He looked up and smiled politely. "Afternoon, can I help you?" "I hope so," Rachel replied, pulling out her phone. "I know this sounds strange, but have you seen these two before?" She held out the screen, the street view still, the blurry figures, the pink hoodie, the man squinted. Hard to say, but something about the man looks familiar. Hard to tell with the face blurred like that. Rachel's pulse skipped. "Do you recognize the church in the photo?" He nodded. "That's here, this street." Before Rachel could ask more, a side door opened. Two men stepped into the room, chatting quietly. Both wore black clerical shirts with white collars, pastors, clearly. One older, one younger, and Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The younger man, his height, his face, the voice. It took her a moment, but then memory hit like a tidal wave. "Evangelist Matthew?" she asked, stunned. He turned toward her. For a second, there was no recognition. Then his face softened into a courteous smile. "Yes, have we met? I'm Rachel Warren, Pine Hollow, Idaho, First Protestant Church." She stepped closer. "You preached at our church 2 years ago, just before," her voice caught. "Just before my daughter disappeared." Something flickered in his expression, a half-second pause, a recalibration, then a warm chuckle. "Of course, yes, Rachel Warren, what a blessing that weekend was." He extended his hand. So many faces, it's hard to keep track. Rachel shook his hand slowly. "You led our healing service. You prayed over a woman in a wheelchair. You stayed in our guest house." Yes, it's coming back now." His words flowed easily, but something didn't sit right. His smile was too steady, too smooth. And then when he reached into his suit jacket for a business card, Rachel saw it. A photograph, half-tucked into his inner pocket. Just a glimpse, but enough, thin paper, the outline of a child's face, a silhouette she knew too well. Her heart thudded. "That's my daughter," he said casually, noticing her eyes on the photo. "I carry her with me always." But Rachel wasn't convinced. Something in her stomach twisted, a silent alarm. Her instincts screamed. The hug that followed was too long. His hand on her back lingered. His inhale too deliberate, as if memorizing her scent. And when Rachel finally pulled away, all she could think was, "This isn't right." Outside, Daniel was pacing. "Rachel," he snapped, "we're already late." She barely heard him. "That man inside," she whispered, sliding into the passenger seat. "It was him, the evangelist, from our church. And Daniel, he had a photo in his pocket. I swear I saw Eugene's outline. I felt it. And when he hugged me." What are you saying?" "I don't know, but it wasn't just a hug. It felt wrong." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Rachel, you're seeing ghosts. You're making connections that aren't there." "Maybe," she said softly, eyes still fixed on the church door. "Maybe I am." But deep down, she didn't believe that. Because something had shifted. And for the first time in 2 years, the trail didn't feel cold. It felt alive. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She tried. She laid in the creaky airbag bed, the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above her and Daniel's breath steady beside her, but her mind refused to settle. It kept rewinding the moment she saw that photo tucked into Evangelist Matthew's suit pocket. The curve of a cheek, the silhouette of a girl. She'd only seen it for a second, but a second is all a mother needs. That and the hug. The way his hands lingered, the way his body pressed in too close. The scent of vanilla, Eugene's scent. By morning, Rachel was wide awake, seated at the tiny kitchen table, staring again at the Google Street View image on her laptop. Mole Street, the pink hoodie, the man's posture. She zoomed in again, frame by frame. This wasn't imagination. It wasn't obsession. It was instinct, and she was done ignoring it. Later that day, after a brief, strained check-in with the police, who promised to follow up with the church once they had more, Rachel made a decision. She told Daniel she needed air. He didn't argue. He just handed her a protein bar and told her to text if anything came up. But she didn't go for a walk. She got in the rental car and drove, first back to Mole Street, then around the surrounding blocks. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, maybe nothing, maybe everything. She passed parks and schoolyards, churches and soup kitchens. But the truth was, her heart was pulling her somewhere she hadn't identified yet, until she saw it. Evangelist Matthew's car, parked outside a red-brick Lutheran dormitory with a small green yard. Her hands began to shake. She parked across the street behind a tree and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. And then the woman appeared, the same one from the day before, the one loading suitcases into Matthew's car. But this time she wasn't alone. She was with children, 5 of them, all carrying small suitcases, all walking in a straight line behind a nun-like woman who seemed to be some kind of dormitory matron. One by one, the kids loaded their bags into the back of the car, and then Rachel saw her. At first, just a profile. Then a turn, then the face. A little taller than before, hair shorter, but those eyes, that dimple when she smiled, the tilt of her head, Rachel's breath vanished. Eugene. She didn't need a DNA test, she didn't need confirmation. Her body recognized that child as surely as it recognized its own skin. Her hands moved before her brain did. She called Daniel, her voice trembling, and whispered through tears, "She's here. Daniel, I found her. She's right here. It's Eugene." "Where are you?" he asked, voice rising, already halfway to the car. "I'm texting you my location. Hurry and call the police." She hung up before he could answer, then stepped out of the car. Across the street, the children were being ushered into the van. The woman was distracted, talking to the dormitory keeper. Rachel ran. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think. She sprinted across the street, across the grass, her shoes barely touching the ground. She screamed, "Eugene." The woman's head snapped around. She reached for the van door. "Kids, get in now." But Eugene had already turned, and she froze. Eyes wide, lips parted. A heartbeat of disbelief passed between them. Then, "Mom." Rachel reached the door, threw it open, and pulled her daughter into her arms. "It's really me," she whispered through sobs. "I'm alive. You're safe now. I've been looking for you every single day." Eugene clung to her. "They told me you were dead," she whispered. "They said God took you to heaven." "I'm here," Rachel said, brushing hair from her face. "I never left. I never stopped." The dormitory keeper walked toward them, alarmed. "What's going on? Who are you?" "This is my daughter," Rachel said, still holding Eugene tightly. "She was abducted from Idaho 2 years ago. She's mine." Daniel arrived seconds later. He barely put the car in park before leaping out. "Eugene!" he called, voice cracking. Eugene's head jerked toward the sound, and then she ran to him. He fell to his knees on the grass, catching her in his arms, sobbing into her shoulder. Rachel joined them, the 3 of them clinging together as if the world might rip them apart again at any second. The van engine revved. Rachel turned. The woman was trying to leave. Daniel ran to the front of the vehicle and slammed his palm on the hood. "Don't move!" he shouted. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, closer, until they skidded into the parking lot like a movie scene. Officers jumped out, weapons drawn, ordering everyone to freeze. It was over. And yet, it was only just beginning. The police separated everyone. Rachel and Daniel were escorted to one cruiser with Eugene, who clung to her mother like a lifeline. The other children were taken into protective custody, dazed but unharmed. The woman who tried to drive them away? Detained. Her name was Carla Benson, Evangelist Matthew's assistant. According to her, she was just helping with ministry. But the police didn't buy that. Neither did Rachel. They were taken to the station, where a specially trained child interview officer sat with Eugene in a warm room painted with murals and soft light. Rachel watched through the glass, the kind made for victims and the people who'd fought for them. Eugene sat quietly at first, then she began to speak. "He told me my parents were in a car crash," she said softly. "He said he was at the funeral. He had pictures of it, a casket with flowers, my mom and dad's faces printed on little cards." Her voice cracked. "He said I was chosen, that God needed me to stay with him, that it was a test of faith." Rachel closed her eyes, her nails digging into her palm. Detective Morris, an older man with a voice like gravel and eyes too kind for his job, led them into a private room afterward. "We've confirmed the man you knew as Evangelist Matthew is actually Derek Lanton," he said. "Multiple states, multiple aliases. He faked his seminary degrees, created an online trail of false credentials, and used churches as hunting grounds. Rachel didn't speak. She couldn't. He travels, collects sympathy, and positions himself as a spiritual figure with healing power. We believe many of the miracles he claimed were staged, including the woman in the wheelchair you mentioned. Rachel finally looked up. She never came back to the church. No, Detective Morris said. She doesn't exist under that name in any real record we could find. Daniel put his arm around Rachel. How many children? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We're still sorting through the evidence, Morris replied. But Eugene wasn't the only one. He moved them between homes, posing as a father figure, sometimes claiming to run a discipleship program. All under the radar. Rachel thought back to the way he hugged her, too tight, like he was measuring her reaction, like he was seeing if she remembered him or suspected. And she had, deep down she had, but suspicion wasn't enough. Not then, now it was everything. In the hallway outside, Pastor Graham, the head of the church Rachel had visited just days before, stood pale and shaken. I had no idea, he said, his voice hoarse. We hosted him in good faith. I feel responsible. Rachel looked at him. I know, that's how I felt too. He nodded slowly. We've canceled all services this week. But next Sunday we'll be holding a special prayer, a service of thanks. If you and your family would be willing, we'd be honored to have you share your story. Rachel glanced at Daniel. He nodded. We'll come, she said softly, because it was a church that led us back to her. And maybe, through all this, someone else will find their way too. Later that night, back at the Airbnb, Eugene curled between them in bed. She had fallen asleep with her hand wrapped around Rachel's shirt, as if afraid it would all disappear again if she let go. Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I'm sorry, he whispered, for all the times I didn't believe you. For all the times I made you feel like you were chasing ghosts. Rachel shook her head, brushing Eugene's hair gently. You were scared, I was too, but something kept telling me to keep going. Your faith, he said. My love, she corrected. Faith is part of it, but love is louder. Daniel reached across their daughter and took Rachel's hand. You brought us back together. No, she whispered. Eugene did. We just followed the pieces she left behind. The next morning, the sun rose early and warm over the city. Rachel looked out the window, holding her coffee in one hand and Eugene's favorite hoodie in the other, the same pink one with the unicorn patch, now folded neatly at the foot of the bed. She turned to Daniel, who was helping Eugene pack her things. Do you think we'll ever stop looking over our shoulders? She asked quietly. No, he said, but maybe we'll stop expecting the worst. Maybe, she said. Or maybe we'll just get better at knowing what's real. Daniel smiled, like a blurry photo on Google Maps. Rachel laughed softly, her voice catching. Yes, she said, like that. Because in the end, it wasn't the map. It wasn't the phone call. It wasn't luck. It was a mother who refused to stop seeing her daughter even in pixels. A mother who believed not because she had proof, but because her heart told her the truth. And in a world full of lies, sometimes that's the only map you need.